Hello and welcome to Rajya Sabha Television. You're watching The Big Picture with me, Frank Pereira. The Pakistan government appears to have acknowledged for the first time that 2611 mastermind Hafiz Saeed, who has been placed under house arrest by Pakistan and listed under an anti-terrorism law, was a threat to the country. Pakistan media quoted the country's defense minister Khwaja Asif as saying that Saeed could pose a serious threat to the society and has been arrested in the larger national interest. The report came after the Indian government cautiously welcomed Pakistan's decision to go after Saeed under the country's Anti-Terrorism Act for the first time. In recent weeks, certain changes appear to have taken place in the country with regard to Saeed, whose detention and the financial curbs on his organizations are connected to international pressure from the Financial Action Task Force. On this edition of The Big Picture, we will discuss Pakistan's terror dilemma. Joining me on the program today are Bharat, Bhushan editor, Catch News, retired Major General Ashok K. Mehta, security analyst, Pinak, Ranjan, Chakravarty, former Secretary, Ministry of External Affairs, and Savita, Pande, Professor, Center for South Asian Studies, School of International Studies, JNU. Thank you so much for joining me on the program, all my guests. Ambassador, I'd like to start with you. What is Pakistan's terror dilemma?
Well, the dilemma is that they have nurtured all these snakes, as somebody, I think Hillary Clinton once said, and they expected that these snakes won't bite them. You see, the ideological jihadist does not care even about Pakistan. To the ideological jihadist, Pakistan is also the battleground. Hence, Pakistan is today facing what they call the battle between the good terrorist and the bad terrorist. And so it has basically nurtured something which has come back to haunt it. So that is their dilemma, because they have nurtured terrorism not from today, since the time they brought in all the mujahideen to fight the Soviet Union in Afghanistan. So today they have a situation where you have nurtured these terrorists, and they are now saying, look, we don't care about Pakistan either. So they constantly have to find an external, what can we say, a scapegoat for it. So either it is India doing it through Afghanistan, and now Afghanistan. Now they have said that we want terrorists, hand over terrorists from, they've told the Afghan government. Afghan government has replied in kind, saying that you hand over so and so, etc. Both have lists of terrorism. So basically that is their dilemma today, that terrorism which they have used as a geopolitical tool has come back to haunt them.
Bharat, Bhushan, is the situation far more complex than it is made out to be?
Well, the fact is that these jihadi groups were nurtured, as Pinak told you, by Pakistan for proxy war against Afghanistan and India. As he was quoting Hillary Clinton, she said, if you have snakes in your backyard, they will someday bite you also. And that's what is happening now. These Pakistani Islamic groups consider their own country, Pakistan, a fair game. They want to convert it into the Islamic Caliphate. So their jihad will not be launched only in Afghanistan and in Indian Kashmir, but also within Pakistan. Within Pakistan, they attack those they believe to be heretics, deviants, or unbelievers. So not only Hindus and Christians, who are a minority in Pakistan, are fair game for them, but so are Shias and Ahmadiyas and everybody else who doesn't follow their version of Islam. So the snakes have come back to bite them, and now Pakistan doesn't know how to deal with them. It dealt with them in the past by distinguishing between good terrorists or good Islamic jihadis, or those that were acting against India and Afghanistan, and bad ones. Bad ones were those who were attacking Pakistani state itself. Now that distinction no longer seems to be working, and they don't know what to replace that analysis with, because if you want to deal with jihadis now, you have to attack all jihadis, and you have to attack jihadi ideology at its root, finish off all Islamic terrorist groups within Pakistan. The question then is whether the Pakistan army and Pakistani establishment wants to get rid of all jihadis, or does it still want to use these Islamic jihadis to modulate the behavior of its neighbors and use them as instruments of its foreign policy, and does it continue to watch these groups through a geostrategic prism? I suppose we'll discuss that further.
Indeed, indeed. Savita Pande, the process has begun, the cleansing process has begun, but has enough been done? Tiny little drops make an ocean. So can we see a silver lining in what has happened thus far?
Very difficult to say, these are knee-jerk reactions. You know, what happened after the school was attacked in Peshawar? They came up with a national action plan, you know, which is just on paper. They came up with military courts in which they executed the people who were already there, convicted, or people facing criminal charges. Now actually there is a move to extend that military court. They're going to go for an amendment to do that. So, you know, these are knee-jerk reactions. What has happened recently is in the span of 1 week, 100 people have been killed in all provinces of Pakistan. So they have to do something to show that they are doing. And the news that came up that Pakistan may also be on the list of countries from where, you know, you have this migration ban. So it's too early to say that something big is going to come up. They had earlier also arrested, you know, and then, you know, what happened in Lakhvi's case, for instance, the judiciary found no case against, or didn't find evidence enough against them. So we still have to wait and watch. Yes, the arrest is a positive step, but to say much has happened because of this, I think will be an exaggeration.
Is there something for India to be happy about, General, you know, or is it just an eyewash as far as Hafeez Saeed's house arrest and travel ban is concerned?
Well, a lot of people in the last week, in fact, majority of Indians look at the developments in Pakistan with a huge amount of skepticism. I myself think that both internal as well as external pressures have finally come together and are compelling Pakistan to deal with the snakes, regardless of their color or who they bite or don't bite. So I think we are at the beginning of a process, so I'm happy about that. I do not agree with people, and a lot of people who are saying that this is cosmetic and the Chinese and are helping them at the UN. I think it has got nothing to do with the Chinese. It is a lot to do with the internal churning that is taking place. And let me quote a story which I have once earlier quoted on a Rajya Sabha TV. In my meeting with Pakistanis, which are happening now quite frequently in Dubai, and we are meeting again next month, what Pakistanis are saying to us very clearly, and these are not military people, these are civilians who are telling us that there is, with this change of regime in Pakistan, military regime,
yes,
you've changed the DGISI, Rizwan Akhtar by Abdul Ghafoor, you've changed Rahil Sharif with Bajwa, the Prime Minister now can say that there is a modicum of civilian control over the military. For the first time, you saw an army chief after many years move out on time.
On that note, the Prime Minister has also succeeded in appointing his own foreign advisor.
And even in the appointment of Tahmina Janjua, people say, and I agree with that the Prime Minister has had his way and not the military. Bajwa said on arrival that I will keep the LOC quiet. He's keeping the LOC quiet. He's asking his officers to read this book by Steve Wilkinson, Army and the Nation.
Yes.
You should look at the army in India doesn't get involved in governance. So these are some of the steps that are occurring inside Pakistan besides the 8 attacks within 7 days. And don't forget the external pressure. The external pressures are profound. General John Nicholson, appearing before the Armed Senate Committee, made a statement saying that this war is unwinnable unless we go for sanctuaries which Pakistan provides to the Afghan Taliban and the connected network. He said 20 of the 98 designated groups are based inside Pakistan.
Sure.
Those who operate against us. John McCain said exactly the same, who's the head of the Armed Forces Senate Committee. Jack Reed, on the other side of the aisle, is saying the same thing. Lisa Curtis, 10 think tanks have given a report to the Trump administration and saying that, look, This cannot work. There has to be pressure on Pakistan.
Fair enough.
Conditional stuff. And a whole lot of things are happening. Lisa Curtis might join the State Department and in fact implement parts of her report. Internal reasons,
And external
external reasons, and I don't think at the moment India has got anything to do with it. What we must
India doesn't
do
have
is-
anything to do with it. I'm
Yeah.
going to take that to Ambassador now. Ambassador Chakravarty, should India have something to do with it? Is it the most opportune time for India to intervene and probably start a dialogue now?
I think we'll have to watch for some more time and watch for a few more steps which are, if I may say, cannot be rolled back. I think it would be fair to say that at the moment we must watch with some degree of skepticism. If what is happening, if what the General said is true, that the civilian administration is clawing back some of the powers which they had ceded to the military for such a long time. But don't forget, personalities have changed. The fundamental character of the military hasn't changed. Okay, he's telling them to read about a certain book about India's democracy, etc. and all that. I would say this is entirely in the domain of still cosmetic. I would wait for some more time and should not rush in, if I may use a fool's fear to tread.
So what is it that we need to watch out for, according to you?
I think we should watch what happens. There has to be some irreversible processes. Okay, the LOC will be quiet. The LOC was quiet earlier also. Then what happened? Of course, you may say, some people argue that we mishandle our own Kashmir, domestic and other political and other issues. But the fact remains that these guys are still coming. And the terrorists are still coming. Today also you had an incident. Yesterday also you had an incident. So it has not prevented the jihadis, particularly of the Jaish and the LET, from conducting their own agenda. So who is going to stop them?
Indeed. Bharat, Bhushan, something has changed over the last few months, and I mean, let's accept that, because after the Shia Shrine attack, we saw that the Pakistani army carried out shelling on the Afghan border, where it claimed that at least 100 militants were killed. It said that the hiding grounds of these militants were attacked. So clearly something must have changed. But what was the turning point, do you believe?
Well, Pakistanis will tell you the turning point was the attack on the army school in Peshawar, when they brought out the National Comprehensive Plan for dealing with terrorism. Now, but I just want to add two things here, that Pakistan has never been honest and consistent in dealing with terrorists. Time and time again they say we're going to act against them, and they act against them selectively. General Bajwa has said that he will act against the terrorists in South Punjab. Now, will he act against TTP and Jamaatul Ahrar, or would he also act against Jaish and Lashkar? That remains to be seen. To say that things have changed so much, that civilian government is in control, I think we are fooling ourselves. Only a few days ago, the Afghan diplomats were summoned to GHQ by the army. Would this happen in any democracy, that the army summons diplomats to the headquarters? And then if we say that the Pakistan army is doing nothing, doesn't want to interfere in civilian administration, I think we'll be fooling ourselves. The duplicity of Pakistan is also evident from the fact that while on the one hand they were putting this fellow Hafiz Saeed under house arrest, at the same time they were opposing his designation along with that of Masood Azhar's as a terrorist in the UN list, and was soliciting the help of China to do that. So there is duplicity there. There's duplicity when they claim that they suffer from the blowback of terrorism because of Soviet occupation of Afghanistan, and then for 2 decades they themselves promote jihadist ideology. Now, if they want to act against it, then they have to act against all kinds of jihadi ideology. Jihadi ideology of all kind has to be completely delegitimized. And the people that they have been supporting up to now, the suicide bombers that Hafiz Saeed has prepared over time, Pakistani friends say he's got 15,000 ready to die. Now these people will have to be de-radicalized. How do you de-radicalize these people? You don't kill them. 100 people that they have killed, you talked about. There are reports already that some of them were already in Pakistani army's captivity and they were killed, and some others were also killed. All I'm saying is killing is not the answer. You will have to de-radicalize, you will have to reskill these people, You have to give them skills that will make them fit into Pakistani society, civil society, without being a jihadi. Now that's a huge task ahead. Is Pakistan willing to do that? I'm not convinced as of now, and I'm willing to go with Master Pinak and Chakravarty that let's wait and watch.
Indeed. A wait and watch approach, I guess, is what India is using, at least for the time being. But, you know, interestingly, for the first time, someone from the Pakistani government has come out and said that, yes, Hafiz Saeed is a threat, and we need to watch out for someone like Hafiz Saeed. Of course, he was immediately ridiculed and he was criticized by political leaders and religious leaders. But do you believe that, you know, something is changing within the government as well as far as Hafiz Saeed is concerned?
I don't think so. I think we have, as I said, we have to wait and watch. Yes, arrest is good, but let's not go gaga over it. There is absolutely no way the civilians can control army in Pakistan. Today, I put my head on it 10 years from now. And then, you know, the civilian government is itself in a big soup. Panama Gate hearings are an everyday affair. The Prime Minister is probably the weakest Prime Minister. And the establishment of Pakistan is known as a hybrid organization, you know. So no way Nawaz Sharif can be stronger than this. The army did not object to the Foreign Secretary selection, yes. But otherwise, look at the attack on India. Has Pakistan given up its policy of using terror as a state instrument? No way. In fact, if you look inside Pakistan, the political violence, insurgency within Pakistan is being met by state propping up in the sectarian organizations. This is what Balochistan is today. So there is no way let's just get up and say this has happened, Americans have said on this side, and certainly not. And I think as far as Pakistan is concerned, our lookout, our analysis should be our own. How much threat do we have at LOC? What has reduced there? What is happening around? And look at it, you know. From Kashmir, the threat spreads to outside Jammu and Kashmir. From attacking the civilians, it's now the military and security establishment, including bases, that are being attacked. So no way can we be complacent. No way can we be imagined that a civilian supremacy has emerged in Pakistan. I think that's the last thing to be thought about from what's happening in Pakistan these days. And last of all, to think that Hafiz Saeed arrest is be all and end all of terrorism, I certainly would not go with it.
Yeah, but General, would you agree that, you know, the hands of the government also in Pakistan are tied, because you really can't do much against someone like a Hafiz Saeed and Masood Azhar who have so much of a clout within Pakistan?
Yes. I think we should welcome the beginning of a process which we hope is a process. This is not civilian establishing control. The word is modicum of control. Something is happening. These are good symptoms to welcome. Now, the story that I could not tell you in the last segment is this. Pakistanis are extremely worried about the bad image that they get outside the country. This story is told not by one, and this story came out in the Dawn also, the Cyril Almeida story.
Yes.
When Ijaz Chaudhary, who is now going as the ambassador to the US, former foreign secretary, is telling Rizwan Akhtar, DG ISI, that, you know, we have to rein in these terrorists, meaning they were particularly, the discussion was about India. And they said we have to rein in the Lashkar, the Jaish, etc. Because it is giving us a bad image. So Rizwan Akhtar turns around in the presence of Rahil Sharif and Nawaz Sharif, and it's a civil military conference, and he said, अरे भाई आप में और हिंदुस्तान में क्या फर्क है? They also tell us the same thing, to rein in the terrorists. And at this conference again, from the Pakistani interlocutors, they said that there was some agreement on reining in this terrorists. Because the new regime, after the new regime came, on this question of the bad image, please remember that most of the generals have dollar accounts and their children study in the United States of America. They are extremely worried about what is happening there. So therefore, what is beginning is something, yes, of course, nobody is saying that a transformation is taking place inside Pakistan. But these are incremental, small baby steps that you can see, and you have to put this together, because this is a massive jigsaw puzzle. And this jigsaw puzzle, the pieces will come together once next year, or rather this year, when the passes open, and we will have to, the first test on the barometer of the General Bajwa barometer is infiltration continuing? Is the line of control hot or cold? What is happening as far as the other moves are concerned on Hafiz Saeed? Is Hafiz Saeed, is an FIR going to be lodged against Hafiz Saeed, never lodged in the past? So we should watch. All I am saying is we are getting a new set of events that are taking place inside Pakistan, including, by the way, inside Afghanistan, from India's point of view.
Sure. Something we haven't seen before.
Because General John Nicholson, you know, this is something quite unusual. The Americans are the ones who have always vetoed India's proactive presence in Afghanistan. General John Nicholson at the same hearing is telling the senators, Armed Forces Senate Committee, that India is doing marvelous work inside Afghanistan in terms of their aid, capacity building, institution building, and we want them to do more. That was unthinkable to hear about that, because it would rattle the Pakistanis immediately. Now, yes, we understand the Chinese are on that side and the Americans are on this side, but at the end of the day, anybody who's a realist will say Pakistan is a key player, geostrategic key player in Afghanistan.
Sure.
But it has this very serious problem on its hands. They want to deal with this problem of dealing with all hues of terrorists, regardless of color, whether they are good or they are bad. The ICG report is also saying the same thing. ICG report is saying that there should be no selective dealing with. So they have to find a way to do this, and we, as far as India is concerned, we should try and help them.
Indeed. All right. You know, we've got about 5-6 minutes left on the program, so I'll start. Let's look at the way forward now. Ambassador, what's the way forward as far as dealing with the terrorists are concerned?
I think that Pakistan today is acting, as we have discussed, under a certain amount of domestic and international pressure. The Financial Action Task Force that you mentioned in your preambular statement is a very crucial one, because that could in fact lead to seizure of certain accounts, etc., of the Pakistani elite, both civilian and military, and that really scares them. Because, or even say travel, ban on travel on them individually, not as a whole thing. So that, I think, worries them a lot. And the image thing that General spoke about certainly is there for everybody to see. You talk to any Pakistanis and they will tell you, "Hame to koi visa hi nahi deta." They are unable to get visas except after severe vetting or whatever that is done, or people who are well known as personalities within Pakistan. The way forward, I think Pakistan has to find a way forward, and it's not easy, because after decades of building up this jihadi ideology, and they have to turn the wheel back. Now that's not easy, I can agree, because after so many generations have grown up with that kind of an ideology, right from school, the kind of things that they are taught in school has to be changed. And I think everybody knows it. What they say about, how Islam is, how things are. But Islam is not monolithic. And there are surely this thing, the ISIS-related incidents that are happening. This is the old Wahhabi, Salafi kind of thing, that we are the true Muslims, everybody else is a deviant or whatever, a kafir. So we must kill them. So that's the kind of ideology that they have nurtured through this terrorism and fundamentalist kind of teaching that they have allowed.
Indeed. Bharat, Bhushan, is the Islamic State a bigger threat for Pakistan, or is it homegrown terrorist groups?
Well, the one is morphing into the other. So terrorism is a threat for Pakistan, whether of the Islamic State kind or the TTP kind or Sipahi Sahiba kind or sectarian kind. All of them are a threat. You talked about the way forward. Before that, let me just say that people and countries tend to replicate strategies which work for them. The Pakistani establishment, especially the army, has seen how nurturing Mujahideen led to the Soviets vacating Afghanistan. Nurturing Taliban led to follow the Mujahideen government there. nurturing Jaish-e-Mohammed, Lashkar-e-Taiba has led to Indian state being destabilized in Kashmir. So why should they give up on this strategy? If they can use this strategy successfully, they use it in Afghanistan, they think they can use it elsewhere too. Having said that, if there is a rethink, then they need to do 4 things. 1, they have to reverse the jihadi trend, as Pinak said. That means there are no good or bad jihadis. All jihadis are bad. So delegitimize them. 2, close down all jihadi camps of all kinds on Pakistani territory. 3, start a program of de-radicalization, as I said earlier. Begin with Jamaatul Dawa. After all, this man is your asset. You put him under compulsion. You had to put him in jail. Put him in jail. Leave him there. But take his people. De-radicalize them. 4, take the help of neighboring countries to reskill these people. You don't like Indians? Take the help of Sri Lankans, Nepalese, Bangladeshis, whoever. Use our ITIs. Convert these terrorists into plumbers, into carpenters, into fitters, into lathe operators. Give them a living. Reskill Pakistan instead of make Pakistan jihadi. So these are the things they'll need to do, and they have to rethink their whole geostrategic use of terrorists and give it up once for all.
Sure. Savita Pande, your concluding remarks.
Yeah, I agree with what Bharat Bhushan said, except that I think this thing of poor people being terrorists is really not. So the focus should be on ideology. The state should have nothing to do with it, because, the earlier thing that poor man becomes the terrorist no longer holds good. Most of the research reports now say higher, middle class, upper middle class, or even higher class, beginning with the biggest of the terrorists, beginning with Osama bin Laden. So you have the de-radicalization program has to focus on education and state giving up its state policy as an instrument. Terror as an instrument has to be given up by the state. That has to be first and foremost. And I think a way forward, when we should talk about India's way forward should be to see that we have an anti-terror policy against the neighbors, regionally as well as globally.
Sure.
5 seconds.
Yes. Please conclude the show for us.
Yeah. I think the major decision makers in Pakistan are the military. The army has to decide on which front. You have 2 fronts. They have a 2-front situation. Now you've got Afghanistan and you've got the Afghan Taliban and the Haqqani network. On this side, as my colleague mentioned, that you've got a Jamaatul Dawa, the Lashkar-e-Taiba, Harkatul Jahideen, and a whole lot of Punjabi Taliban who operate this side. Now you can't simultaneously open 2 fronts. That's not possible. So they have to work out a military action plan which should dovetail with the National Action Plan. National Action Plan was devised after the Peshawar attack. There are some very good features in that National Action Plan, and most of the points that were mentioned by Bharat are included in that, from de-radicalization to mosque control to a whole lot of things. But nobody has the political will to implement those. If the military supports the civilian government, then military is the only authority inside Pakistan that will give a fillip to the implementation, the genuine implementation of the National Action Plan, and taking what they have done with Hafiz Saeed to its logical conclusion, which means that this front, that is the India front, can be diffused.
Sure.
And then they can deal with the Western front. And a lot more things can happen once one front is diffused, but that is only matter of saying. What will happen is something else.
Indeed. What will happen remains to be seen. On that note, we'll have to call it a wrap on this edition of The Big Picture. Bharat, Bhushan, Ashok K. Mehta, Pinak, Ranjan, Chakravarty and Savita Pande, thank you so much for joining me on the program and putting things into perspective for us. That's all the time we have. See you again next time.